The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz along with my co-host Tony Palmeri, and on this edition we're very pleased to welcome each of the candidates running to serve in the 54th Assembly District. To my right, or rather to my left, we have Gordon Hintz. He is the Democrat seeking the seat being vacated by Greg Underheim. And then next to Gordon is Julie Pung-Leschke, who recently won by a landslide the Republican primary against Larry Didlow. So thanks to both of you for being here. We know you're busy campaigning, and we appreciate your taking the time out to join us. Let's start out by talking a little bit about yourselves. You're probably used to this by now, so Gordon, why don't you start by giving us a little introduction as to who you are. You've been on the show before, so folks kind of know, but just give us a refresher.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Gordon Hintz. I was born and raised in Oshkosh, the son of two teachers, raised to value the public service, and graduated from Oshkosh North High School and went on to college and worked in Washington, D.C., later in Madison, and later in local government. So, I moved back a couple of years ago to work both in business and in the local government area, and I've taught at the university in the last year. And I think my experience working in state, local, and federal government in Washington, representing Wisconsin, and here locally, gives me a background that would really lend itself to representing Oshkosh down in Madison in the legislature.
Okay. I want to touch on that in just a moment.
Okay.
But Julie, you've been around the area for a while too. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, though?
Well, everyone thinks I was born and raised in Oshkosh, and I could probably get away with saying that I was, but I wasn't. I moved here with my family when I was 15 and finished high school at Oshkosh North, and went on to Madison for an undergraduate degree, Milwaukee for a graduate degree. And my husband and I were married at age 22. He started medical school 5 days later, so we sort of endured that together. Moved back to Oshkosh in 1987, and we've been here ever since. I have done numerous activities here in Oshkosh. I have taught piano in the Suzuki Talent Education Program at the university. I have volunteered in many capacities. I've been on numerous nonprofit boards here in Oshkosh, and I've worked in several positions, been involved in many areas within the community. And I happen to have 4 sons. 3 are in college now, 1 is in high school, and I also served on the county board. That's my political experience. It was a great learning experience, and I left a little bit of a name for myself as a reformer for positive change while serving. All kinds of odds and ends. I'm working on my MBA, the long-term plan, and just have been a very vital member of the Oshkosh community for quite some time.
Okay. How long did you serve on the county board?
2 terms.
2 terms, okay.
I resigned short of the second term. My sons were in middle school and high school. To be honest, I didn't realize what sort of a challenge being on the county board would be. And with my husband's job the way it was, and my nature the way it was, doing it, 110%, I wasn't able to both raise my children and serve the people of the county properly.
Okay. Julie, the day after the primary, you were quoted by the Oshkosh Northwestern as saying, "I have a message I think people will like to hear and will feel comfortable voting for." What exactly is that message? What how will people feel comfortable about it?
Well, my message is I will be the voice for the Oshkosh taxpayer. Very, very simply.
Okay. Gordon, do you have a message that you want to get out to people?
Sure. I will be, more than just a voice for the Oshkosh taxpayer, but I will deliver. We've had a lot of rhetoric about working with the city and the county and the school district, but the reality is, you need to back that up down in Madison. And we've had a legislature that's been outright hostile to, local government here. And I plan on working with local government, not just communicating, but also backing it up with policies.
I just wanted to follow up on one other thing real quickly before Tony jumps in here. Some of your critics, Gordon, have said that you've not really worked in politics or government very long. Some say you haven't really done that at all, enough to really qualify you for this position. How would you respond to those critics?
Well, I haven't worked in politics directly. I think what I do have is a commitment to public service. I mean, I've spent the last 10 years learning as much as I can, and there's different ways to contribute. When I worked in Washington, D.C., I was representing the state of Wisconsin. I was working with people from Oshkosh when they would come out. I was learning the legislative process at the federal level. When I was in Madison in graduate school, I served on the Kettle Commission, which was directly relating with a lot of the state and local issues that are facing Oshkosh now regarding shared revenue, regarding the property tax. And I worked as a budget analyst. So, I think I have a fundamental understanding now whether or not, I didn't know what level to take it to next, but, I've also taught. So I'm not someone who woke up day one and said, I want to run for office, but I have spent the last 10 years working in government. I believe I understand municipal finance, government finance, and I think that's something that I can contribute. So, after coming back to Oshkosh, I realized that we still had the same leadership and that something had to change.
Okay.
Back in 2004, Dan Carpenter and I combined for 13% of the vote in this district. I think that those 13% could conceivably swing this election this year. They didn't vote for Underheim or Hintz. So what would each of you say to those 13% who voted for either me or Dan Carpenter 2 years ago? What is your appeal to those voters? Start with Julie.
Well, I guess that's what we're finding out during the course of the campaign, knocking on doors and listening to people. There is a variety out there, a variety of messages. Mm-hmm. Although one consistent message is they're tired of negative politics. That's something that very naturally I can accommodate because I'm a very positive person. I'm a people person. I like to listen to people. I have a lot of compassion for people and their needs. And as I go through the city of Oshkosh, I think I can relate to most of the people and most of their concerns. And one of the largest challenges is, if this is truly a 50-50 district, mm-hmm. Then the one of us who is elected does need to represent the district as a whole and listen to all sides of every issue, which is also my nature. I will never vote on anything without checking the facts, without being meticulous, without talking to all people on all sides.
But I think, I want Gordon to answer this question too, because I'm really interested in his answer to this, but I think most of those 13% were very much against something like the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Mm-hmm. Because I ran against that, Dan Carpenter ran against that. What's your view on the Taxpayer Bill of Rights?
Well, rumor has it that Taxpayer Bill of Rights is dead and that there will not be something like that. The other reality is that there are limits set in 27 other states.
So what did you feel about the old Taxpayer Bill of Rights, the one that wasn't dead? Well, the one that Representative Lassay was pushing?
Well, the one that it evolved into, mm-hmm. the Taxpayer Protection Amendment,
yeah,
TPA,
yeah.
And that did not address limiting local governments. It concentrated only on state government. That is something I would consider.
Okay, so a Taxpayer Bill of Rights that puts severe limits on the locals, you wouldn't support that?
Correct. I think the state government needs to take a look at itself first. And I wouldn't call it a Taxpayer Bill of Rights either, because that has, that's sort of gone.
Okay.
We're at a new phase of the discussion.
Gordon, what do you offer that 13%?
Well, I think the one thing you can say about Oshkosh voters, and I found it out on doors, and I'm sure you did too, is I think there are a lot of people that don't identify with either party. There is a lot of independents. I get a lot of people saying, you know, I'm going to make my decision based on the best candidate, or I vote on the person, or I vote on Republicans and Democrats. And so my guess is you and Dan Carpenter served as an outlet for some of those voters, but I would also agree with your comments regarding Tabor that those were 54% of the votes who were voting against what's been going on in Madison. And that's how I look at it. And as the alternative in this race to what's been going on in Madison, I think one of the big choices are, you know, we're going to have more of the same. You know, more cuts in state support, more increases, more results like the state garbage fee, or the city garbage fee. Are we going to have inaction on health care? Are we going to have legislature that's dominated by, you know, gay marriage, guns in malls, and a lot of these, you know, the death penalty, with very little action on the issues that are hitting working families in Oshkosh? So I view that as, you know, that was a 54% was saying something, and they were saying we don't like the direction. And I think if we're going to look at this race, it's going to be about, you know, who's going to give us the best leadership for a change beyond what we have now.
Sure.
You're both seeking a seat that has been held by Greg Underheim for, gosh, close to 2 decades probably.
Yeah, 18 years.
Thereabouts. And, you know, those are some big shoes to fill. Whether you agree or disagree with his politics, that's a long time in office and big shoes to fill. How would you each distinguish yourself from Mr. Underheim?
Well, I'll start. I mean, the biggest thing is, you know, again, so many of the decisions made by our current state assembly have been hostile towards our local institutions, which are the direct service providers for the community, city government, county government, the 3rd largest university, the largest correction facility. And so a lot of it is, you know, just communicating, showing up at the meetings, getting on the agenda regularly, and being a part of it, knowing that the decisions that you make at the state have a large impact on us locally. I mean, when you talk to people on doors and they're fed up about the garbage fee, you know, they need to understand that this was largely a result of decisions made by our state government, and we've had state representatives who supported this. And, you know, we need someone down there who's going to say this has been bad for our community, this doesn't work with us. You know, we want government to address the healthcare crisis. We want, you know, government to have some sort of plan for jobs, have some sort of plan for the university. So I think, you know, I don't know how Greg started out because I was in 7th grade, but in recent years, one of the reasons I ran was because I just did not think he was an effective legislator in terms of working with our local government. Most people don't care if it's state or local. They want to see some cooperation. They want to see good value for their tax dollar. They don't want to see passing down of healthcare costs and fuel costs, you know, to local taxpayers.
Okay. Julie?
How would I differentiate myself from Greg?
Yes.
Well, I'm just a different person, so I would you know, approach things differently and carefully, and come to my own conclusions for each issue that's discussed. And in fact, I'd like to ask that I not be lumped in with the the legislature, you know, in the past years, because either one of us that is voted in is a new face and is a change. And I would say that I would be very open, very honest, very communicative with all local leaders. I was on the county board, and I would think that even those who perhaps disagreed with me would tell you I was very communicative, very willing to discuss and work out solutions to all problems and issues.
And yet, Julie, you had the opportunity to respond to a survey to demonstrate that you really believe in reforming political campaigns, financing, and other political issues. And I believe twice you didn't respond to that survey. Is that right?
Well, the second deadline is November 1st.
Okay, so you still have time to do it.
Sure.
But can you see how people would interpret your not responding as that you are part of the establishment down there?
No, I can't see any constituents interpreting it that way. In fact, most constituents are unaware of those special interest surveys, and I have 50 or 60 of them. I'm sure Gordon has as many, and most candidates probably do not complete most of them.
But why didn't you complete that one?
Well, what I'd like to say is, in terms of communicating with my constituents, The Northwestern has asked basically identical questions, and I have responded. It's
Right.
on the internet. Responding to those questions basically goes out to the group and outside of the city of Oshkosh. That's something that was picked up by the Democratic Party chair, and that was criticized for not returning it by him first. And then it was picked up by the Northwestern, and I guess I just disagree with the premise. I disagree with the premise that that is any indication of my commitment to ethics.
All right, well then what, I'm assuming if you didn't fill it out that maybe you don't agree with some of the reforms.
I'm very supportive of Senate Bill 1.
Okay.
I am very, very supportive of all ethics reforms
Right.
that are on the table in terms
Right.
of an inspector general, in terms of a consolidation of
Okay.
ethics board and elections board. The one issue on that survey that that I am not comfortable with is public funding.
Public financing of campaigns. Okay, why?
Well, and this is why I'm kind of not a politician, because I'm probably overly honest, overly idealistic perhaps. But I think what will happen, number one, there's only 6% voluntary support of public funding now on the checkoff on the taxes. In my mind, and let me say ahead of time, I would be willing to discuss it. I have not discussed Mike Ellis's version of
Right.
of that kind of funding. I would be willing to discuss it. But on first glance, my thought is, with public funding, you lose the direct connection with your constituents, you lose the direct support from your constituents, and the people who are willing to not be truthful in campaigning would have an advantage.
Yeah, but you also lose the pressure from
Yeah.
special interests, right?
And perhaps there could be a difference between treatment of special interest groups and treatment of individuals supporting candidates.
No, but I mean, if the two of you didn't have to make phone calls to raise money, then there would be no suspicion that you're beholden to anybody. I mean, the way the system is now, there's always that suspicion that you were beholden to whoever paid the bills. But with public financing, doesn't it take that suspicion away?
Well, and I would just like to say, I mean, the people who traditionally are opposed to public financing are politicians, are incumbents who want that 8-to-1 spending advantage that I think was just released in this last report. Those who are open to consideration of public financing are seeking what's true to democracy, which is competitive elections, which is competitions not decided by special interest groups.
Well, do you support full public financing?
I think it's something we have to put on the table. I support competitive elections. I mean, for all the people that say, well, we're not going to spend taxpayer money funding campaigns, I say, look how much money we waste allowing special interest groups to get their perks and benefits in our legislation. Certainly, public financing would save us money in that regard if we're able to reduce dependence on special interests.
You know what, I have just need to insert something here. I think the people who create ethics reform for government, for state government, should not be the legislators. We should have a group of non-legislators come up with a plan for ethics reform. And then there would be no suspicion that someone is trying to make a better deal for themselves, whether it's public financing or whether it's whatever the case may be.
And I need to say just a couple things on a few comments made. We need to look, you know, why was SB 1 killed? The head of the Republican Assembly, Mike Hipsch, was criticized in over 8 different papers in the state as killing it. And when we get back to the differences between Greg Underheim and us, ultimately Greg was a part of the Republican Assembly, which he voted with 98% of the time. You know, there's going to be so many issues, whether it's things like SB 1, whether it's a $400 million cut to education, where my opponent is going to have to make a decision. Is she going to stand up with Oshkosh, or is she going to stand with her party? And I think that's one of the big issues. You can be a new face, you can be a good communicator, you can have a vision, but ultimately it's going to come down to, are you going to stand with the city, or are you going to stand with your party? And I think I offer a better alternative in that regard.
What do you say to that?
Number one, I say SB 1 is not dead. I'm sure it will be.
But can you acknowledge why it was killed?
I haven't had that discussion with Mike Hipsch, and I wouldn't say that it's killed. I would say it's in the process of being discussed. And it will be brought back up from what I hear. And
It had, you know, it had bipartisan support in the Senate, 28-5. It had bipartisan support in the Assembly. It had the votes, and it didn't get done. And you know, with regards to the survey, this was by the League of Women Voters. This was by Common Cause. You know, this wasn't the Teachers Union or WMC. I mean, these were groups who wanted to get positions out there, and it was a yes or no survey. So
you're saying they were not special interest groups?
well, I'm just
I mean,
saying it was a matter of let's inform the public of positions. We get a lot of surveys. Julie's absolutely right, and a lot of them are directly looking for our positions. These groups weren't going to do anything with our positions but let the public know. Plenty of Republicans answered, plenty of Democrats answered it. They were yes or no questions. You know, I didn't think all the questions were perfect, but I thought they were more beneficial than the current system that we have.
Okay.
And I thought there was a right to know.
Julie, go ahead.
I had a conversation with Kathy Propp, who has no problem with my not completing the survey. You know, it is something truly that unless you run for office, unless you're heavily involved with politics, you don't have that understanding of what these surveys are all about. So it's a very easy way to be critical of me, but it really doesn't really have any meaning in terms of ethics reform or my desire to communicate with my constituents.
You were going to say something?
Well, I was just going to I mean, it's been, you know, the Northwestern decided that it was important. They said anybody who couldn't fill out a 6-question survey probably doesn't have business serving, and yet you're going to wait till November 1st to fill it out. I just think the people deserve a little bit more, you know, where you stand on these issues, even if you answered it for the Northwestern regarding all 6 questions.
Which people?
The citizens of Oshkosh.
Right.
I'm just saying the Northwestern said, will you answer these positions, you know, clearly? They thought it certainly was a valid survey. They thought it was something that candidates that are running for office should answer. And, you know, granted, you have till November 1st, but I don't think the people of Oshkosh should have to wait till November 1st to find out where you stand on ethics reform.
The people of Oshkosh, I would welcome to look on the Northwestern webpage where I specifically answered the questions for the Oshkosh Northwestern.
The questions that you agreed with.
The questions that the Northwestern asked.
Well, let's talk about one of those questions right now, because you know, Tony just interviewed Greg Underheim on his radio show last week, and he's seeking a position as a lobbyist with the UW system, correct?
Yeah.
And one of the questions was, do you support and would you sign into law legislation to tighten Wisconsin's revolving door policy by requiring at least a 1-year cooling off period before former legislators, top legislative aides, and key executive branch officials can become registered lobbyists, and then it goes on. But how do each of you feel about that? Would you support and sign such legislation into law?
Absolutely. I mean, whether it's the federal level or the state level, one of the things that we often see, and even though there's no proof, but we see votes directly in the interests of organizations in the last budget, in the last session, then someone steps down and they immediately go to work for that organization. And again, even if there was no direct link, it is the distrust that is the appearance of it that I think lessens, you know, confidence in our system. So I think it's only fair that we get some separation time in there. Now, granted, I understand why so many ex-legislators stay in the process. They have learned their way through. They know how things work. But I think if we're going to restore some of the confidence, I think it's only right that we have a little separation.
Okay. Julie?
You know, I haven't given that any thought at all, but upon hearing it, it's something that I think I could definitely support.
Okay.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about K through 12 education. You know, it's under a financial crunch. Democrats have been supporting a repeal of the qualified economic offer, which puts limits on benefit increases for teachers. How do you feel about the QEO?
I'm opposed to the QEO, and I think one of the, again, I think I answered that in June as well, one of the dynamics we see at the state level is actually as a percentage of money spent on education, teacher salaries in Wisconsin are the lowest as a percentage. We average $7,000 less than the national average in terms of teacher pay. Benefit pay is much higher, which puts us more towards the top in total. But the QEO is a kind of a flawed, and we have a bad relationship between the state and teachers right now. And as long as the QEO is in place, we're going to see salaries low and benefits high. I think we need to get some health care reform on the table.
All right. Hand in hand with the QEO has been revenue caps.
Right.
So do you support removing revenue caps?
Well, I think when we discuss revenue caps, we need to look at the education funding formula, because what we've seen is lower spending school district get penalized by the funding formula that we have in place right now.
All right, Julie, QEO, revenue caps?
Well, there are no easy solutions. QEO has served its purpose. We are a high-spending state in terms of education, certainly if you take the total of the salary and the benefits. We're also a high-performing state in terms of the kids doing well on their SATs and their ACTs. There is criticism of the QEO for opposite reasons. Number one, that it's holding down increases, but number two, that it is keeping school boards from offering lower increases when maybe that is preferable at some point. So unless there is very careful discussion about an alternate plan, I don't think we can eliminate it. I don't think we can eliminate QEO or revenue caps without careful consideration about what takes its place.
All right, so you're basically saying keep them in place?
For the time being.
All right. Do you have anything else on K through 12 before we move on to another issue? All right, let's talk about the minimum wage. It was raised to $6.50, and you supported that increase in the minimum wage, correct?
I did.
Okay. Did you support that increase in the minimum wage?
I think that support was necessary. It's not an ideal, end-level job, and I would hope that we as a society, as a state of Wisconsin, begin to encourage people to look beyond that minimum wage job for their permanent jobs.
Because the majority of Republicans did not support increasing the minimum wage.
Oh.
If you had been there, you would have supported increasing the minimum wage.
Contrary to what Gordon thinks, I will be comfortable voting against my party when I need to for Oshkosh.
So that would be one. You would have supported that increase in
I believe I would have supported. Again, I don't know the intricate details of all of the issues on both sides of that particular issue, but from where I'm at right now, I would have voted for the minimum wage.
All right, Cheryl.
Okay. Well, let's talk about jobs. I mean, Julie, you had said that people shouldn't look at $6.50 an hour jobs as career choices, and I agree, they shouldn't. Unfortunately, with the unemployment situation as it is, a lot of people have to resort to those kinds of jobs in some cases just to, make ends meet. So what would be some of your ideas for spawning new jobs in the state of Wisconsin, and specifically this area?
Economic development is something that I think will come from the leaders in the community. Right now, we have leaders in the business community. We have leaders in the university community, Richard Wells and others, and we have a regional effort that is working extremely hard, and including government, at developing economically in this area. And what I would do as a legislator is initiate regular, consistent discussion with leaders in the community, business leaders and various groups that employ people, labor groups, education groups, and take ideas, initiatives, perhaps ideas about maybe what government is doing that is tying their hands, and then make changes happen at the state level.
I'll tell you what's not going to help create jobs is banning civil unions, referendums on the death penalty, allowing people to bring guns into malls, cuts to education by $400 million, all the decisions made by our current state legislature, led by Republicans. What is going to work is making sure that we emphasize skilled labor. Right now we have a labor shortage in areas of people with skills. A lot of our manufacturing that is competitive now results in high-end jobs. We no longer need a welder. We need someone that can work a computer, that works machinery. If you go up to Fox Valley Tech, it is very technology advanced. With these, we need to link, jobs with our investment in education. I think Chancellor Wells is talking about a lot of those initiatives, Dave Bittner at Fox Valley Tech. But I mean, linking education directly with employment, emphasizing our quality of life here in terms of job recruitment by protecting our natural resources and, you know, showing all the things we have to offer, including good schools. And maybe most importantly is lowering our healthcare costs. It's a huge burden right now.
Right. Both of you have suggested that the university is going to play a key role, and yet a study came out that said that Wisconsin gets a grade of F in terms of university affordability. It's happened under a Democratic governor, Gordon. I mean, under Jim Doyle, the tuition it's skyrocketed. So how can the voters of this community believe that Democrat Gordon Hintz can do something about affordability?
Can you just say who gave the grade of F?
I can't remember the organization, but it was a study that ranked all of the states, and Wisconsin got an F in affordability.
And that's a huge issue. Look, I taught at UW Oshkosh last year. I had a lot of conversations with my students, many of them who were having a difficult time paying for school, were getting priced out, or were working full-time jobs, and I understand that. But we have the third largest university in the state, and what we need to do is recognize that the university is actually a revenue enhancer, that every dollar we spend on the university is something that is actually going to generate income, unlike a lot of state programs which are just dead dollars. There's sunk costs.
But you don't support a tuition freeze?
We have a tight budget still, and committing to a tuition freeze without understanding what implications that would have on the university budget, I think it's something we need to work toward. The one thing that study that you're talking about mentioned was that our financial aid is really small compared to other states, that has not kept up, and that is what's keeping people that can't afford school from being able to attend. The one thing I will say about the last few years in the university budget is, just because we've had some tough budgets that have had cut the university does not mean that you don't have a long-term plan, and that's been the biggest thing that's been disappointing. I think all the state agencies, departments, programs recognize that they're part of the same pie, but we need to think beyond two-year cycles. Okay, what is our goal for the university long-term? How are we going to fund it? What's our vision going to be, and how can we tie that to economic development? And that's what I plan to work on.
Julie, university affordability.
Yeah, and Gordon and I agree on a number of issues regarding economic development and regarding investment in the university and its necessity in terms of that economic development. I will be having an appointment with Richard Wells in the next couple of weeks and talking in more detail about what he is looking for, and tying into his vision, I think, is very important. Funding is a problem.
You don't support a tuition freeze?
Well, I think I don't like the idea of saddling the students with bad budgeting that's going on in the state of Wisconsin. If they take all of the hits, that's not fair. But a freeze, I don't know if that's very doable either. We have a $2.5 billion structural deficit, and we have a lot of challenges going into the state budget.
I've been a faculty member at UW Oshkosh for 16 years now, 17 years. I've never seen the morale as low as it is now. Now, one reason for that is UW faculty cannot even vote on whether or not they would like to unionize. We're not unionized, but we don't even have the legal right to vote on whether we want to unionize. There has been legislation to give us the right to at least vote. So, do you think that UW faculty should at least have the right to vote on whether they want to unionize?
Sure.
So you would vote for that in the legislature?
Sure.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay, because it hasn't happened, and it's usually been both parties that have been problematic on this, so we'll hold you to this one when you get elected.
Well, you touched on healthcare a little bit earlier, Gordon, and certainly that's, at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. They're either underinsured, they're not insured at all. Except in the city of Oshkosh, everybody says they've got a gold-plated health plan, so I guess that probably is true. But in any event, what would each of you do to make sure that everyone in Wisconsin has access to some kind of health care plan?
You bet. Well, I'd say you're bringing up the city is a very good point about why we need to reform health care, because the #1 increase in government spending locally is healthcare costs, and the #1 thing when Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce did a survey to their members, they said, what is the #1 thing impacting your business? And they said healthcare costs. Look, government has a responsibility to address healthcare costs and access. And even Governor Tommy Thompson came out this week and said we should ensure, states should be responsible for coming up with health insurance for everyone. And the disappointing thing is knowing Wisconsin's got some of the highest healthcare costs in the country, there has been no comprehensive plan. I mean, every time one of the 600,000 uninsured people in Wisconsin goes to the doctor, you pay for it, you pay for it, you pay for it, premiums pay for it, taxes pay for it. We've got a system that allows for cost shifting. We can't have real competition that we're always talking about unless everybody starts with a basic level of health care. There are some plans out there that I think begin to address it that would be good starting points. The Wisconsin Healthcare Plan being one of them, which at least gives everybody a minimum level of care with, sort of on a tiered basis that you could negotiate above. I think that's a starting point for discussions, but until we address cost shifting, until we address the uninsured, we are going to continue to be faced, public sector, with increased fees and taxes or cuts in service, and competition issues for private sector. I mean, how can our businesses be expected to compete with Canada, for instance, where we're seeing Toyota and a lot of major industry moving? They've got fixed costs. It is time to turn this disadvantage in Wisconsin to an advantage. California, Maine, Massachusetts, several states are pushing, and that's why I was glad to hear Governor Thompson get on board too. So the one thing about doing doors in this community, I think the biggest change over 2 years is how many people are impacted by this, and it seems like government's response is, you're on your own, pay more, and I've talked to a number of people who are so negatively impacted or saddled with high health care costs that they're no longer going to the doctor, and that ends up costing us more in the long run. Sure.
Well, Julie, your husband's a doctor, so I realize he doesn't do his own billing or handle his own insurance things, but I'm sure his staff talks to him. He's acutely aware, I'm sure, of the situation, as you no doubt are. So how do you feel about it? I mean, what would you do to help ensure that everyone in Wisconsin has access to some kind of health care plan?
Well, and the interesting thing is, as we sit here running for the 54th Assembly District, one of us winning is one of 99 people in the Assembly. Opposite the 33 state senators under a governor. So the notion that either one of us can come up with a plan and institute it is impossible. So basically, either one of us would be entering the discussion that's already in place. And before we can even talk about health care and health care for everyone, we have to talk about the financial state that our state is in. And the main thing I'm hearing at doors is we can't pay any more in taxes. The Wisconsin Health Plan, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau memo indicates an $8.7 billion deficit right off the start.
It was one analysis, but they said you might want to get an actual actuary analysis. But
sure. So in terms of finding solutions, we need to be fiscally responsible, number one. And we're sort of at a point in our state where we need to be almost like a family who, every single family at some point goes through that point where they think, oh my gosh, we've bitten off more than we can chew, and we've got to tighten and that kind of thing. So to begin talking about new programs when we've got a huge deficit and we're not we're overtaxing our citizens already is a problem. But answering healthcare, it's affordability, it's accessibility, it's quality, which every single person in this state demands and wants, and it's consumer choice. Those are the main
Why
elements.
have the Republicans in the Assembly been so against moving forward with health care that would ensure and lower costs and help out local government expenditures? I mean, I guess that is my problem. We've got so many big issues on the table, and the agenda has been so far removed from addressing health care that, I think whether we're just one vote out of 99 or not, we need to keep pushing. And right now, we've got, a legislature that doesn't seem very interested in
Well, I
that.
believe one or two of the plans are bipartisan.
Yeah.
There is movement. The problem is there are so many varying ideas out there. There is no agreement on the direction we should take.
Julie, you had said that, you know, you're one of 99, and it's like a big family. People in families find a way to help each other out, though, when there's a problem. Don't you think that the legislature should find a way to help out the family members who have no insurance?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And that's what the discussion will be about.
Okay.
Julia, a few of my friends in the community are senior citizens, and they told me that they got a mailing from you that said that you're against the pension tax. What is the pension tax, and why are you opposed to it?
Well, basically, people are leaving the state of Wisconsin because their pensions are taxed, unlike neighboring states.
Okay, so assuming we get rid of the pension tax, and you just said we're in this bad financial crunch, where do we make up the money?
Well, when the people leave the state, then we lose those citizens and their contributions to the economy of the state and their children and.
But do we have any like substantial evidence that seniors are leaving Wisconsin in droves because of this?
I guess I don't know the numbers. I know that I've met up with many as I've been knocking on doors who've said they're not residents.
Because the reason why I bring that up is because one thing I like about your appeal is that you say you're not a politician. But doesn't it seem like when you go to senior citizens and say, I'm going to get rid of your pension tax, that sounds like something a politician would say.
Well, no. See, the difference is, you know, and I'm surrounded by three people here who probably have political philosophies that are different from mine, so in general. So basically, the difference is we have different political philosophies. And what I would say to people is because I believe it's the right thing to do. What you would say to people, it's because you think it's the right thing to do. And I think it would be the right thing to eliminate taxes on the pensions.
But I think Tony's hitting on something here which seems to be a bit of fuzzy math, because in your previous statements you just said that, you know, it's difficult to be committing programs when we don't have enough revenue. And I actually saw that piece and I contacted the Department of Revenue, and over the next 3 years, by 2009, it would be over $200 million of lost state revenue, which ultimately would get passed on to working people. And so there are implications to decisions like that. You're right, it sounds like a good idea. I would like to come up with money to exempt pensions as well, but the reality is we've got this pie, and it is ultimately going to be a tax increase for everybody else.
And if that were taken a step further, there could be more light shed on that if people avoid our state in general because of the overall tax climate.
Yeah, I know people say that, but I keep looking for evidence of that.
Well, we were Wisconsin, out of all the Great Lakes states, was the one state whose population grew. More people moved here in the last year than left out of all the Great Lakes states.
Businesses?
People.
I mean, but businesses offering jobs and that sort of thing?
Tony, I was asking about people, and I just was talking about migration.
Can we talk a little bit more about taxes?
Sure.
Okay. I want to ask you both about this. From 1972 to 85, the high-end income tax rate was 11%. Now it's 6.7%.
In Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin. It's gone down dramatically. And do either of you favor, in other words, whether you make $400,000 a year or $40,000 a year in this state, you're at that 6.7% rate. And it seems to me that's where the money's gone. I mean, is it time to think about raising the top income tax rate? I know that's no new taxes is like the mantra of all the parties now. But is it time now in a financial crunch to think about raising that top rate?
See, this is the philosophical difference that I guess Republicans get criticized for, because it seems, and I would have to check the math, but it seems that tax cuts have often brought in higher revenue, because the people end up spending more, and then they end up paying more in sales tax, and then it's more money in your pocket to spend in the economy.
All right. So you think that someone who makes $400,000 a year should be at the same tax rate as someone making $40,000 a year? Is that what you think too?
I genuinely support progressive taxation.
So you wouldn't support raising that tax?
I support looking at tax incidence, who's paying, who's benefiting. My real ill right now is property taxes, which I think are unfair. I think Wisconsin needs to look at our mix of taxes and decide if this is the appropriate level to have. We have some states that have higher sales, higher corporate income.
What
and
about,
lower
all right,
property
stay on
taxes.
sale. What about expanding the sales tax?
You know, right now I think taxes in Wisconsin are pretty high.
Okay.
And to remain competitive, we need to be aware of that, our state versus other states. Again, we have chosen the system we have, which relies heavily on property taxes and heavily on user fees.
And okay, you probably don't support expanding the sales tax either.
No.
Okay. See, what frustrates voters, I'm going to put on my voter hat now,
Okay.
is that people running for office talk about programs that are going to cost money,
Right.
but then they never want to support anything that will bring in money. So where's the money coming
I
from?
mean, the Governor's Council, Bipartisan Council on Educational Excellence, I think that was in 2004, their proposal was to increase the sales tax a penny,
Right.
a cent, and decrease property taxes as a result. Property taxes are, you know, unfair. They disproportionately impact poor people, and with the sales tax, it exempts food and medicine and impacts people that consume more material
Sure.
goods. So, I mean, I think there is a case. Again, my brother lives in Minnesota. He has, you know, higher sales tax, higher business taxes, lower property tax. I think it's time to look at us. You know, again, let's do a tax incidence study, see who pays, who benefits. But again, I think too much is being paid for with the local property tax.
But now that doesn't make sense because you don't support the property tax freeze.
Correct. Because that was, I don't support arbitrary controls. To me, I'm an advocate of getting at the root cause of spending. And I acknowledge that the #1 reason why government spending at the local level is going up is because of fuel costs and healthcare costs. Putting a freeze on it puts a place like Oshkosh in a choice of whether we add an unfair garbage fee or we cut core service. If we actually move forward with the healthcare plan, we could realize some additional savings. I mean, and we have to look at it over time. Again, the state has decided they're going to give cities less in shared revenue, and that's all been made up by property taxes instead of the mix of sales and income that was going to come in the form of shared revenue.
But you realize that Cheryl and Greg and the other legislators were responding to their constituents.
All their decisions have done has raised our property taxes and fees. So I don't know who they were responding to, because most people I know are not real happy.
Well, on the subject of fees, I mean, Governor Doyle has suggested that, you know, the tax burden can be controlled or at least eased in some way by the use of more fees. You know, how do each of you feel about that position?
I mean, Wisconsin has traditionally had higher taxes. We are one of the higher tax states, and lower fees. This is a choice that we've made because we felt that fees were regressive. We wanted to keep things affordable. When you add fees into things, we fall in the rankings considerably. Traditionally, people have been more supportive of fees if there's a natural link between who uses it and who benefits it, like locally. People who pay the fishing fee to launch their boat, or the boat launching fee, they pay, money stays to improve the dock areas. You know, I think if it's reducing the property tax burden, we need to look at some of those things. I mean, it's one of the, you'd say tuition is a fee. That's largely gone up because we've left our mix of taxes flat. You know, I think we're going to need to look at things like that too. Do we want the current system we have? Because again, right now, the highest growth is on the local property tax. The states cut back, cities have made up the difference.
Okay, Julie?
I'm sorry, you lost me on that one, Gordon. Repeat the question, please.
Well,
My point is, the states cut back, property taxes have gone up locally. There's a natural reason to explain why we have the tax system that we have, and it's largely been by the Republicans who are in power. So my point is that if the state cuts back to the city to provide the services that we provide, property taxes go up. The state has higher taxes and low fees. We could look at increasing fees and keeping taxes flat, but these are choices that we have to make. Right now, the state has decided, hey, we're going to pay for things with the property tax, and I don't think that's right.
okay.
Well, in general, the main message I'm hearing, other than that politics is too negative, the main message I'm hearing is that taxes are too high. So in general, we just need to control our spending. We need to create processes where we analyze how we're spending our money in every single department across the state. We need to look for efficiencies. We need to, instead of pointing fingers and always blaming the other party, or blaming the local government, or blaming the state government, we need to start looking at...
Okay. One way the governor's trying to save spending is to lay off 10,000 state employees. Do you support that?
Well, I don't know which state employees the governor is aiming at, but if he feels there are 10,000 state employees that are not necessary, that's kind of an amazing thought.
Right. Do you support laying off 10,000 state employees?
No. I mean, I think that was a misstep. I don't think you should throw a number out there. I think we need to decide, you know, well, how we can provide services effectively and how many people it requires to do that.
Okay. I got 3 questions that I think that you can both answer yes or no. 2 of them deal with the referendum questions that are going to be on the ballot this November, the marriage amendment and the death penalty. How are you planning on voting on the marriage amendment referendum?
Well, I would just like to say that that the marriage amendment is not a 54th Assembly District issue, but just to clarify, the marriage amendment is just that. It clarifies the state statute. Is marriage between a man and a woman.
But it would also ban, it would be the most strict language in the nation on these kinds of referenda.
It matches Michigan.
It could ban civil unions. What I'm really asking is, are you going to vote yes on that?
I will vote yes on that amendment, but it is misunderstood.
And how are you going to vote on it?
I'm going to vote no. I think I've knocked down thousands of doors. Not one door has said this is a problem. We had 17,000 divorces in 2005, not one gay marriage. Yeah. You know, I'm opposed to amending the Constitution.
Okay. The death penalty, there's going to be a referendum question. It's advisory. And so I guess at some point it could come into the legislature. You might have to vote on this. Are you going to vote yes to bring back the death penalty?
No.
Okay, you're against the death penalty?
Correct.
No.
Okay. And the final one, I think this will probably come back again. It's not a referendum, but it's the conceal carry. What's your view on conceal carry?
I'm opposed to the conceal and carry. You know, the idea of bringing guns into malls, movie theaters, high school sporting events doesn't seem like a great idea, but I made my decision after meeting with Mike Brooks, our county sheriff. I wanted to know from law enforcement what their concerns were. I've also talked to a variety of gun owners who do support this. I think, you know, I've talked to people who said if we do go with a conceal and carry, I want to know if my neighbor has a permit. Well, when you talk to the people who support conceal and carry, the whole point is not knowing. So I know it's going to come up again. I know there's been amendments that have tried to say, well, no guns in child care. Or
But it sounds like you'll vote against it.
I will, as long as law enforcement continues.
All right. Julie, concealed carry?
Well, concealed carry, it's one of those gut response things where you think, no, I don't want concealed carry. But being a fact finder, wanting to look at issues carefully, when you start reading the material, 48 states have it. Law enforcement virtually against it before making it law, reverses their decision after it's in law. With careful consideration, I could support concealed carry.
Okay. It costs money to put into place.
We'll look at the budget issues very carefully.
Once again, everyone's talking about bringing things in that cost money, but
yeah.
Well, there's a plethora of social issues facing us in Wisconsin. What, for each of you, are some of your top social issues, and what would you do to work toward resolving those issues?
When you say, I mean, social issues that we're facing,
yes.
I mean, in Oshkosh alone.
Well, you're going to be part of, you know,
bet.
a huge group of people, and so I think that, I don't know that we're unique here, that we have our own social issues that aren't elsewhere.
Well, I guess, you know, what falls into social issues, I would say, you know, homelessness is a social issue, you know, poverty. Certainly we're seeing an increase in those, and locally I'm certainly concerned with that. We have 38% of our kids that attend public school now qualify for free or reduced school lunch. And I think that's something the community needs to be more aware of, and the state needs to take into account. We are seeing the impacts of income and job loss here in the community, and we need to find a better way to make sure we're helping people get back on their feet, and that we are supporting good paying jobs that will, you know, help reduce that number. But you're seeing it statewide and nationally, both severe inequality and severe opportunity limited. So I would say that's a social concern of mine in a very local level.
Okay. Julie?
You know, I agree. I think the single biggest social issue we have is that We have a lot of people who are more and more dependent. And we as a society, we're very compassionate people. We want to take care of people. We want to make sure everyone has what they need to live in this world. If we could perhaps look at school curriculum. We live in a very, very, very financially complicated society. I'm afraid that people graduate from high school and from college without the skills they need to know how do you buy a house, how do you save money so that you can support yourself, your spouse, your family through life. And I think socially, if we can catch those people who might fall through the cracks earlier, we can solve a lot of problems before they start.
Just one quick question.
Sure.
If either of you get elected, what would be the one committee that you'd want to definitely sit on in the legislature?
To be honest with you, I haven't thought about it.
I haven't either.
Okay.
You'll have to have us back on again.
Well, I hope
Then
you,
we'll
I hope
answer
you
that
volunteer to be
question.
on the higher education committee.
All right, we're down
Sounds
to
good.
about 3 minutes here, so why don't you each take about a minute, look into camera 3, and tell voters why they should vote for you on November 7th.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm Gordon Hintz, and I'm asking for your support on November 7th. I think you've heard from two candidates tonight, two candidates raised in Oshkosh, graduated from Oshkosh North, both had parents who served on the city council and as mayor, both have links to UW Oshkosh. But I think you also heard some differences, and in future debates we'll hear some more differences. Are we going to have someone who supports the city of Oshkosh with reasonable health care policy, with shared revenue support, with realistic cutbacks on decisions that will help reduce the property tax burden, or will we continue with the legislature's current direction, which has been spending time on guns, gay marriage, a lot of the divisive issues. We're also going to have differences on some other important issues, stem cell research and some other things. So I ask, as you're making your decision, you listen closely to the issues, and who do you think offers the best vision for the future of Oshkosh and Wisconsin? And again, I ask for your support.
Okay, Julie?
Thank you. Thank you, Tony and Cheryl, for this hour, and
Thank
Gordon.
you for coming.
I will be the voice for the Oshkosh taxpayer. I've enjoyed meeting people at doors, and I hope to meet all of you at some point or another. I will work towards building a better future for Wisconsin by bringing in jobs, by working toward excellence in education, by working for healthcare solutions, and truly listening to the people of Oshkosh and representing you in Madison. Please feel free to contact me with any questions at all, and I look forward to meeting you out on the streets of Oshkosh.
Okay, very good. In just one real quick question, you know, our legislators in the past haven't been very responsive in coming to city council meetings, local school board meetings, county board meetings. If elected, would you folks pledge to go to those meetings?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the things that's been missing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, very good. Well, the election is coming up on Tuesday, November 7th. You've got two good candidates here, and you have to make your decision and go with it from there. So go to the polls. If you're not registered to vote, voting registration has changed a little bit, so contact the city clerk or the county clerk to get some information on that. Again, it's Tuesday, November 7th. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks to both of our guests. Tony, thanks to you as always. And thanks to you for letting us in your homes for the last hour. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.